Alright guys, time for my quick thoughts once again, and these thoughts are probably going to be pretty quick because I just finished up watching the true story of the Royal Rumble, which was more or less just a clip show. That was pretty much about it. So, like I've told you guys in the past, I'm not some big, huge, diehard fan of wrestling. I'm a very average, mediocre fan, and even my fandom really doesn't go past like the very, very, very early 90s. When I say very early 90s, I mean once like people like The Rock and stuff started showing up, like once wrestling got that second win, it became really, really huge. I was way out of wrestling at that point. I really watched late 80s wrestling with my father, and that's the time period of wrestling that I really enjoy because it's very nostalgic for me, since I do remember sitting down in the living room with my father at lunchtime, eating my grilled cheese sandwich that my mother made me, watching, the Honky Tonk Man and the Bushwhack Brothers and the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter and all those guys, duking it out. That's what I remember, and that's what I love. So wrestling does have this nostalgic hold over me that I really enjoy. But when it comes to again, modern day wrestling, by modern day I mean kind of like early 90s and on, that's modern for me. It's not something that's very nostalgic for me, but it is something I do enjoy learning about. So I like documentaries on wrestlers that maybe I didn't grow up with, or the history of events like this that might have started out when I got into wrestling and when I liked wrestling when I was a really little kid, but then it expanded past that as well. I like learning about that because I get to learn about where it came from, and then all the stuff that happened that I never watched or cared about or knew about because I was out of wrestling at that point. And that's why I tend to really enjoy these documentaries. Unfortunately, I think the problem here is that there wasn't much of a story. I pretty much think, from what I could gather from this documentary, is that the Royal Rumble was basically created because they needed to fill like a fourth quarter time slot. They had other events that were making money, and they needed some new event to bring in the money and go on pay-per-view and whatnot. And they went, hey, the Royal Rumble, that's something we can do. And that was pretty much the story from what I could gather. There really wasn't much of a story, so they kind of revert to telling you, how it began. In the very beginning, I'd say maybe the first 15 minutes of this is kind of a documentary. They tell you how it began, why it began, how it ended up going to pay-per-view and whatnot. And then the rest of the documentary is more or less just a clip show showing you kind of, events that happened during the Royal Rumble over the years. And, you're kind of getting what you're getting. I would not expect very much from this documentary, if you really want to call it that, more or less to get a clip show. You're not really getting much from it because it is just a clip show and there's not much of a story to tell. So would I recommend this? If you were a fan of wrestling, if you're even your average fan like me and you're just kind of interested in the history of it, you might like it. If you just like the wrestling documentaries, you might be into this one. But I would say pick this one up cheap. Do not spend your hard-earned money paying full price for this new or something like that. There are much better documentaries on different wrestling organizations, the history of ECW and the WCW and all that stuff, and different wrestlers, and even I believe I forget, WrestleMania documentary was really good as well. So, all those documentaries are great and worth your money, but something like this, sure, check it out if you're into wrestling, because it is, the history of the Royal Rumble, and you are getting a fun clip show, so a trip down memory lane for, I'm sure, many of you who are really into wrestling. I might remember actually watching some of this stuff on TV, but since it is just kind of a clip show, it isn't really necessarily worth your hard-earned money, and it is worth waiting till you can find it used or for cheap or something like that online, or like me, I picked this up for $3.99 at a thrift store. So, was it worth $3.99? Yes. Would it have been worth much more? Not so much, because again, it is just pretty much a clip show. Now, you are getting a bunch of different matches and whatnot on disc 2, so that's pretty interesting. I'm not really in it so much for the matches. It's cool to have those kind of as a bonus, in my opinion. When I pick these up, I don't really pick them up for all the different matches they show. I pick them up for the documentary that's included, and then the matches and whatnot are kind of just bonus material, in my opinion. So really, the way I see it, you're paying for the true story of the Royal Rumble documentary but you're kind of getting a clip show. So, again, would I recommend it? Yes, if you're into wrestling, it is worth checking out, but definitely pick this one up for a bit cheaper, because it's not nearly as good as many of the other documentaries that are out there. It felt really kind of weak, but again, I think that's because they didn't really have much of a story to build on, so they had to do what they could. They had this tiny little story, and then they went, clip show time, essentially. So, it was okay. I guess see it if you're really into wrestling, but definitely wasn't my favorite, and I really don't see myself ever watching this again, unlike some of the other documentaries that I will definitely check out time and time again. This is probably my first and my last time ever checking this out.